The lights inside the National Forum studio were bright enough to blind. Cameras lined every corner, their red lights blinking like watchful eyes. This wasn't just any broadcast. It was one of the most anticipated political debates of the year. The room was packed, buzzing with energy. Reporters, students, policy advisors, and international correspondents sat shoulder to shoulder, all waiting for sparks to fly. At the center of the polished wood stage stood Alan Garber, president of Harvard University. Dressed in a dark suit, his face calm and firm, Garber represented the voice of elite academia. His speech had started strong, filled with quotes from scholars, references to political theory, and firm criticism of former President Donald Trump's era. With a composed voice, he said Trump's populist politics had damaged the nation's intellectual fabric and created a crisis of truth. The audience nodded, some clapped, others took notes. Garber was in controller, so he thought. Just as he concluded one of his points, the host smiled and turned to the side. "And now," she announced with a grin, joining us as a surprise, panelist is Karoline Leavitt, former White House press secretary. The room shifted, some murmured, others stiffened. Garber turned slowly, surprised. Karoline walked onto the stage, cool and confident, her heels tapping sharply against the floor. At only 27, she had become one of the youngest and most controversial figures. In American politics, her presence wasn't expected. It wasn't announced, but now she was here. She nodded politely at Garber, took a seat, and waited. The host leaned forward. "Ms. Leavitt, as you've just heard, President Garber has made a strong case against Trump-era politics and its effect on the academic world. Do you agree?" Karoline smiled faintly. "I think it's very easy to throw stones from glass towers." A small laugh came from the audience. Garber didn't react. For decades, Karoline continued, places like Harvard have claimed to protect truth. But sometimes they hide behind that claim to protect something else: power, influence, and money. The studio quieted. The air grew tight. Garber leaned forward. "If you're accusing this institution of corruption, I hope you've brought up more than talking points." Karoline turned to him, still calm. "I have. And I'm glad you brought that up, Dr. Garber. Since you mentioned truth, let me ask you something directly. Do you remember a funding agreement made in 2004 between Harvard and a technology firm called Jinjiang Advanced Systems?" Garber blinked. The name meant something to him. That much was clear. "That company," Karoline continued, "was later flagged by U.S. intelligence as a shell front for the Chinese government. In 2004, it funneled nearly $12 million into a Harvard research program signed and approved by your office." Gasps filled the room. Few reporters scrambled to check their tablets. The host opened her mouth, unsure if she should interrupt. "That's a false narrative," Garber said finally, trying to steady his voice. "No such connection was ever confirmed, Kate. And even if such a grant existed, it was handled by the finance department." Karoline leaned slightly forward, voice firmer now. "We found internal memos, Dr. Garber, your initials, your approval stamp. And the research project wasn't just academic kit, involved AI guidance systems. The same kind later found integrated into drone navigation used by foreign military operations." The room fell into dead silence. Outside the frame of the cameras, a producer waved his hand nervously. Another leaned toward the earpiece, whispering to the host, "Do we cut to break?" But no one moved. The tension had glued everyone to their seats. Karoline's tone was still steady. "I'm not here to defend President Trump. I'm here to expose hypocrisy. You can attack the former president all you want. But the truth is, while you were lecturing the country about moral responsibility, your institution was taking money from a hostile regime and burying the evidence." Garber stood up, visibly rattled. "This is reckless, dangerous. You are politicizing national security." Karoline didn't flinch. "I'm not politicizing it. I'm revealing it. Camera flashes went off. One reporter in the back whispered into her mic, "This is no longer a debate. This is an exposure." Garber looked at the host, but she gave no help. This was live. The broadcast was already viral. And then Karoline dropped the final line. "Some truths," she said, locking eyes with Garber, "are hidden behind tenure, but not forever." The stage lights suddenly felt hotter. Garber's face turned pale. The audience, unsure whether to clap or gasp, just stared. The Harvard president, for the first time in years, had nothing to say. The moment the broadcast ended, the studio erupted. Not with applause, but with confusion, urgency, and panic behind the scenes. Karoline Leavitt calmly removed her mic, standing up. As producers and headsets scrambled around her, reporters shouted questions that no one was ready to answer. Alan Garber had already left the stage, his security escorting him through a side exit without a word. Backstage, the energy was electric. Karoline walked down the hallway with a steady pace, her phone already buzzing with messages. Some were from allies, some were warnings. One was a text from a blocked number that simply read, "They'll come for the documents." In the green room, a junior producer named Alina watched the replay footage again. She zoomed in on a still-frame Karoline, holding a thin folder during the debate. It wasn't part of the pre-cleared materials for the show. Lena frowned. It wasn't just political theater. Leavitt had something real, something off-script. Across the city, at Harvard's law department, internal emails flew like wildfire. One subject line read, "Urgent response plan, Leavitt accusations." Reply chain confirmed what Garber had refused to admit live. There was a file. And it had been quietly sealed in a restricted archive on campus since 2010. Only 3 people had access. Now that number was growing unintentionally. By 8 p.m., CNN and Al Jazeera had both run breaking headlines. Harvard under fire, China-linked research deal sparks political firestorm. The headlines weren't kind to Garber. Even his defenders looked worried. The phrase "Leavitt Papers" started trending on X inside a dimly lit apartment in Foggy Bottom. A retired intelligence analyst named Carter Ames lit a cigarette. He watched the debate rerun, pausing on Karoline's face as she exposed the 2004 deal. "She knows," he whispered. His phone rang. He didn't answer. Karoline, meanwhile, arrived at a private location in Georgetown. A nondescript office. Building with no signs, no logos, just a secured door. Inside waited 2 men and a woman, all in their 40s, all stone-faced. They weren't political advisors. They were investigators. Independent, quiet, and very expensive. "You brought the folder?" the woman asked. Karoline opened her bag and placed the folder on the table. "Copies only. Originals stay with me." The lead investigator, a man named Roth, opened the folder and skimmed through. Memos, email printouts, handwritten notes from a Harvard department head in 2004. One memo outlined a strategic cooperation agreement with Xinjiang Advanced Systems. Another described dual-use technology research. And one email, written in Mandarin and translated on the spot, included this line: "Approval confirmed by AG. No mention in press. U.S. side to suppress details. Until post-2020. Roth exhaled slowly. This isn't just academic scandal. This could breach national security protocols." Karoline nodded. And it was signed under the radar during an election year. The timing wasn't accidental. Back at Harvard, Garber sat in a locked office, red-faced and exhausted. His assistant, pale and shaking, placed 2 folders in front of him. One was a list of media requests, over 60 interviews in the past 4 hours. The other was a legal strategy outline from the university's general counsel. "We'll need to go on the offensive," the assistant said. "We can say this is politically motivated." Garber didn't respond. He simply stared at the folder that had ruined his night. By midnight, a second file was leaked to Politico. It contained portions of an internal grant approval form with Garber's initials. Someone inside Harvard was flipping. The White House issued a no-comment statement. Meanwhile, Karoline watched the story unfold on multiple screens from her hotel suite. She knew the next 48 hours would be critical. Already, anonymous sources were trying to discredit her background. Old university transcripts were posted online. A fake rumor claimed she'd received classified documents from a Trump holdover. Another said she was being used by foreign-funded think tanks, but Karoline didn't blink. She had expected the storm. What she didn't expect was the knock at her hotel door at 1:17 a.m. She looked through the peephole. A man in a black suit stood there alone. No badge, no ID. She didn't open the door. Instead, she called Roth. "There's someone at my door," she said quietly. Roth paused. "Do not answer it. We're sending someone now. Don't move. And turn off your phone." Karoline put the phone down, then pulled the curtain aside. Down on the street, a black SUV sat idling. This wasn't just politics anymore. It had become something else darker, older, and far more dangerous. The hallway outside Karoline's hotel room was quiet now. It's too quiet. The man in the black suit had vanished, but the presence he left behind still lingered like a storm cloud before lightning. Karoline had pulled her backup phone from her jacket. Pocket one with no SIM card, no connection to her official devices. She texted Roth using a secure messaging app. Gone. But he knocked twice. Just stood there. She waited. 30 seconds. Then a reply. "On our way. Burn everything physical. Go to Route C." She moved quickly, gathering the documents on the table. The originals were in a fireproof envelope hidden inside the lining of her suitcase. The folder she had taken to the studio, the one everyone had seen on live television, was a decoy. A carefully prepared set of redacted papers, enough to trigger curiosity, but not the full truth. As she burned the decoys in the room's small fireplace, her mind spun with questions. Who knew about the file? How deep did the connection go? And more urgently, who had just knocked on her door without a word? At that same moment, inside a nondescript federal office in Virginia, a meeting had just ended. The building bore no insignia. The men and women inside didn't wear uniforms. One of them, a tall, silver-haired man in his 60s, had just shut off the TV. The replay of Karoline's debate moment had ended. "She has the original file?" he asked. "We believe so," said the woman across from him. "But we don't know if she's made digital copies." He nodded slowly. "If she did, she's a national threat. If she didn't, she's an asset. Either way, we need her." Back at Harvard, Garber was in a different kind of war room. His legal team was assembling strategies. Media advisors were crafting language, mischaracterization, selective leaks, bad faith attacks. One suggested claiming Karoline had doctored the files. Another wanted to shift blame onto lower-level staff from 2004. Garber ignored them all. He was staring at a redinked printout one that hadn't been made public yet. It wasn't just about funding from Xinjiang Advanced Systems. This was about the follow-up. The part no one had dared speak about. A classified memo from 2006. It contained a warning from a U.S. counterintelligence officer. Xinjiang's funding aims to acquire Dulu's research via soft targets. Harvard AI lab under surveillance. Garber rubbed his eyes. "Get me the Department of State," he finally said. Meanwhile, Karoline was already on the move. She exited through the underground garage in a rideshare van that had been paid in cash. Route C led her to a safe house in Northern Virginia, where Roth and the investigators had set up a temporary operations room. The walls were covered in maps, redacted memos, strings connecting people, and dates. The whiteboard read, Garber, Harvard, China, D.C. Intel Nexus. Roth handed her a file she hadn't seen yet. "One of our guys inside a defense contractor." confirmed that Xinjiang AI software matches systems used in South China Sea drone incursions. Same code base. Harvard's research had fingerprints all over it. Karoline's throat tightened. So, they're using our own academic work to target our allies. Roth nodded. That's why they're panicking, and why you need to keep your head down. She looked him in the eye. I'm not backing off. He leaned in. Then you need to understand something. You didn't just expose Garber. You pierced a web of people who've been working for years to keep this quiet across agencies, universities, and corporations. Just then, the door buzzed. One of Roth's security team stepped in, whispering something urgently in his ear. Roth's eyes narrowed. They found us, he muttered. Karoline stood. Who? Don't know. Could be feds. Could be private. But they've tapped 2 of our burner numbers. We move now. They packed fast. Karoline grabbed her encrypted drive. Roth locked down the safe house. As they exited, a dark sedan turned slowly down the street. The driver wore sunglasses. Too dark for night. No plates. We'll go to the fallback, Roth said. Karoline didn't argue. Back in D.C., journalists were asking new questions. Who gave Karoline the files? Were they stolen from a federal database or leaked by someone still inside Harvard? CNN reported. A subpoena had been issued for Karoline's communications. MSNBC aired a segment suggesting she was being manipulated by far-right networks. But another outlet, Al Jazeera, took a different tone. They called it the Harvard dossier. Suddenly, the story had gone global. And while the world debated her motives, her loyalty, and even her safety, Karoline was already 2 steps ahead. Because deep inside that encrypted drive, hidden behind layers of code, was a folder labeled Appendix 9 DARPA Collaboration 2007. And if that file was real, then this story wasn't just about Harvard anymore. It was about the United States government itself. The safe house in Virginia had been stripped clean. No signs left behind. Roth's team worked with military precision, no trace of electronics, no fingerprints, no data trails. Karoline sat in the backseat of the lead SUV as they moved toward the fallback Saitan abandoned estate once used for diplomatic training during the Cold War. The roads were empty, rain lightly pattering the windshield. She gripped the encrypted drive like it was alive. In her mind, the file named Appendix 9 DARPA Collaboration 2007 kept flashing like a warning light. What's in that appendix? She finally asked Roth, who sat in the passenger seat ahead. He turned slightly, his voice low. We're still decrypting. But our initial sweep found reference numbers tied to early AI targeting protocols, joint funded by DARPA and an international partner. Karoline didn't blink. Let me guess the partner wasn't listed. Roth nodded. Alien metadata. A code name, Red Lantern. That's intel slang for state-backed research out of China. Karoline's stomach turned. So Harvard's deal didn't just involve money. They were a conduit, unwitting or not. We're past unintentional now, Roth said grimly. This was engineered. And someone inside the government helped clean it. The car went silent. By dawn, they reached the fallback Saitan, overgrown manor surrounded by trees, built like a bunker. Inside, a dusty conference room was already prepped with satellite uplinks, signal jammers, and old-school filing cabinets. Roth's team had operated out of worse places in Kabul and Istanbul, but this felt different. This was home soil. Karoline sat down at a steel desk. I want to go public again. Roth exhaled. Not yet. They'll smear you as a traitor, arrest you for leaking classified materials, even if you didn't. The public needs more than papers. They need proof of intent, a direct order, a voice, a face. Karoline clenched her jaw. So we find one. Back in Cambridge, Harvard's internal crisis unit was in meltdown mode. Leaks were multiplying. A whistleblower had sent scanned contracts to a German journalist. Another had released a transcript of an internal meeting from 2010, where Garber allegedly told a colleague, "This research is the future if we don't lead. China will. Garber was still silent. But the State Department wasn't that morning. They released a vague statement. The U.S. government does not confirm or deny ongoing investigations into academic partnerships. Translation. They're spooked. Meanwhile, Al Jazeera aired a primetime report titled Academic Espionage, the Harvard-China Link. It included old footage of Garber at a 2006 conference in Shanghai, shaking hands with an executive from Jinjiang Systems. The anchor posed a chilling question. Was elite U.S. education used as a cover for weapons-grade innovation? Back at the safe house, Roth's team cracked another segment of Appendix 9. It was a memo between DARPA engineers and a private firm called Thermodyne, Solutions based in Maryland. But now defunct. The memo read, Model calibration achieved. Integrated with drone pattern recognition. Partner site confirms efficiency rate above 89%. Thermodyne, Karoline asked. Never heard of it. They dissolved in 2015. Shell company? But get this, Roth said. Board included a former Assistant Secretary of Defense and a visiting scholar from Harvard's Quantum Lab. Karoline leaned forward. That's the face. We find that scholar. They began the trace starting with archived records, old yearbooks, security badge data. Finally, they landed on a name, Dr. Elias Mencken. Born in Israel, educated in Cambridge and Boston. Disappeared from academia after 2014. No. Recent activity, not even a LinkedIn page. Ghosted, Roth said, which means he either adored someone, made him disappear. They checked federal records. Nothing. Then Roth cross-checked old security clearance logs from a leaked 2012 contractor breach. And there it was. Mencken, Level 5 clearance. Non-citizen contractor. Project Firewall. Karoline's eyes widened. What the hell is Project Firewall? Roth hesitated. That's black tier, above our pay grade, but some of my old contacts. Insigent whispered about it. A defense firewall not for servers. For people. High-level digital cover identities. Used to erase someone or create them. Karoline stood up. So Mencken isn't missing. He's hidden. And someone powerful wanted him gone. Suddenly, one of the analysts burst in. Intercepted transmission from Langley. They know Karoline. Accessed Appendix 9. They're flagging her under internal protocol. Hatch protocol status. Roth froze. Hatch protocol was CIA speak for soft containment. Discredit, destabilize, disappear without fingerprints. We need to move her again, he said. No, Karoline replied. So we go forward. Release part of the data controlled clean and through someone untouchable. Roth gave her a long look. Who do you have in mind? Karoline answered without pause. Bring me Julian Park. The broadcast was set for 10 p.m. Eastern. Al Jazeera's Washington bureau had secured the footage, the digital trail, and the exclusive interview. Julian Park stood in the green room reviewing notes. Outside, the wind howled against the studio. Glass. But inside, the tension was silent. Thick. ChatGPT said. The military SUV tore through the Nevada desert under a moonless sky. Dust clouded the air behind it, swallowing its trail. Inside, Karoline sat wedged between Roth and a former DARPA analyst named Vega. Her palms were slick, but her eyes were steady. They were chasing something real, something buried both in the sand and in memory. Satellite recon had shown the compound just 20 miles ahead. No direct roads, no heat spikes, no internet lines. Perfect for a secret too dangerous to leave. In Washington, it's the kind of place where ghosts went to disappear. Roth loaded a schematic onto a tablet. Facilities shaped like a horseshoe. One central dome, low energy signature. Underground vaults, likely. We're looking for Elias Mencken. He's still alive. Vega spoke up, her voice cautious. If he's not, there'll still be logs. Data recordings. Mencken was paranoid. He backed up everything, especially after the 2007 Red document. Karoline turned. The Red document. Vega hesitated, then nodded. Classified AI protocol tests. Simulated chaos algorithms. Scenario maps for mass unrest. He predicted that if autonomous control was leaked or manipulated, could be used to destabilize governments. Artificial riots. Trigger words embedded in social feeds. People wouldn't even know they were being programmed. The car fell silent. Finally, Roth said what they were all thinking. And Harvard helped fund it. They reached the perimeter. By 2:38 a.m., no fences, just rock. But the entrance was real half-buried beneath rusted panels and desert brush. Roth led the way with a thermal torch. The steel hatch had a palm scanner dead, long unpowered. Vega bypassed it in 30 seconds. They descended into darkness. Inside, it was cold. The facility hadn't been abandoned. Just left untouched. Air was filtered. Lights flickered faintly. Not bright, but working. The corridor was lined with old security cameras. A small red light blinked on one. Karoline froze. We're not alone. A speaker crackled overhead. Static. Then a voice. You were faster than I expected, Mencken. Roth aimed his weapon upward. Where is he? The voice came again, clearer now. It's only one way forward. Down 2 levels. But be warned what you're looking for. Once you see it, you can't unsee. They moved quickly. Karoline's heart raced with every turn. Each hallway told of story-broken monitors, stacked file boxes labeled neuromap interfaces, charts of simulated public behavior, even speech triggers grouped by language and demographic. They reached the vault. Inside, under low light, Elias Mencken sat, thinner, older than his last photos, but very much alive. His left arm trembled slightly, a sign of long-term stress or illness. Karoline stepped forward. Why send the message? He looked up. His voice was soft, brittle. Because you already blew the lid off the door. But there's something worse you don't know. Roth didn't lower his weapon. Talk. Mencken raised a small device and turned it on. A holographic screen hovered. News clips, social feeds, algorithmic outputs. Lines of code ran in the background. Look, he whispered. This is the model they developed after Appendix 9, codenamed Chorus. It's not just surveillance. It learns emotion, patterns, then triggers unrest quietly. A phrase, a post, a whisper online. Suddenly 10,000. People are on the streets. Or worse, blaming the wrong person. Karoline's throat tightened. You mean dash elections, ... protests, ... even riots? He nodded. Manufactured, not all of them, but enough to swing narratives, change policy, burn reputations. All under the guise of freedom of expression. Vega scanned the interface. Where was the model deployed? Mencken looked up, guilt in his eyes. Tested in Myanmar, scaled in Ukraine, refined. In the U.S., Karoline felt the floor shift beneath her. And Garber? She asked. Mencken sighed. He approved. The original contract's academic cover. Instead, it was for research. But when money started coming from Xinjiang, he stopped asking questions. Outside, the facility lights dimmed. Power was being rerouted. Roth turned. You've got a security breach. Mencken stood weakly. They know you're here. You have 5 minutes before this place locks down permanently. Karoline grabbed a stack of drives. These files will. They prove it. Yes, everything. Communications, data flow, funding, testing outcomes. But once you leave here, the game changes. You'll be hunted. She looked at him one last time. Not about you. Mencken smiled faintly. My job was to build the machine. Yours is to destroy it. As they ran back through the tunnels, alarms began to blare. The sun was just starting to rise outside the desert, casting long shadows over the landscape. When Karoline stepped out into the light, she wasn't the press secretary anymore. She was a witness. And now the world would have to choose. continue believing the illusion, or face the truth behind the curtain. Karoline sat across from him. She was composed, but her knuckles were white against the armrests. Roth's team had secured the perimeter, but there were no guarantees. The CIA's hatch protocol meant psychological. Warfare first, then quiet elimination. Julian glanced up. You realize once this airs, you're not going back to your old life. Karoline's voice was clear. There's no old life, not after what I've seen. The countdown began. 10 seconds to air. A quick shot of the opening graphics. The anchor's voice rang out sharp, global and deliberate. Tonight, a former White House press secretary exposes documents that may link a top U.S. academic institution with covert weapons research and Chinese funding. This is more than a leak. It's a confrontation. It's a screen cut to Julian and Karoline. The interview began with background, calmly. But Julian, seasoned and careful, pushed where it mattered. Tell us, he asked, what is Appendix 9? Karoline didn't flinch. It's a classified annex within a DARPA collaboration project that involved a U.S. defense contractor, Harvard-affiliated researchers, and what we now believe were Chinese military proxies using academic front groups. She slid a thin folder. Across the table, these are internal memos, not just showing financial transfers, but deployment testing. The AI was trained for drone recognition, surveillance filtering, even predictive combat simulations. And it was shared, under the radar. Julian blinked. Shared with whom? Karoline looked straight at the camera. With China. Through researchers with known affiliations to Jinzhong Systems, a defense tech firm with military contracts out of Shenzhen. The screen split to display footage. Dr. Elias Mencken at a 2006 summit in Hong Kong. Shaking hands with Jinzhong's director. The next from Mencken listed as co-author on a U.S. patent for autonomous trajectory optimization in hostile environments. The bombshell landed. Social media exploded. Within 15 minutes, hashtags like #HarvardGate, #ProjectFirewall, and #Appendix 9 were trending across platforms. Reddit threads dissected every paragraph. Newsrooms in London, Berlin, and Tokyo scrambled for copies. But the consequences moved faster than the facts. At Langley, a red light blinked on. The hatch protocol had failed. Karoline was public. Touchable. 4. Now, back in Cambridge, Harvard's Board of Overseers convened an emergency meeting. For the first time in decades, they discussed presidential removal proceedings. Garber's silence was no longer strategic, it was damning. He was scheduled for a keynote at the Brookings Institution the next morning. Instead, he disappeared. Canceled flight. No sightings. Security outside his home said he hadn't returned. Since the story broke, Roth and his team watched from a makeshift command post in D.C. He's either running, Roth said, or someone took him off the board. Karoline was quiet. Then, we need Mencken. The public won't settle for documents anymore. They need a voice. A defector. Roth nodded. We have a location ping. He threw a file down. Satellite recon from 2 days ago. Off-grid facility in Nevada. Deep desert. One heat source. No utilities. But one old fuel truck made a drop. Registered under a shell company, once tied to Thermodyne. Karoline leaned in. That's where they buried him. Julian was still on air, broadcasting a second segment. We're receiving new materials from whistleblowers connected to the original DARPA programs. Tonight, we have early drafts of correspondence involving Harvard's leadership, suggesting they were aware of certain overseas affiliations, but chose to classify them as non-reportable research collaborations. The anchor turned to camera, his voice cold. In other words, plausible deniability. That line would loop endlessly on YouTube. Millions watched. Students staged protests. Faculty resigned in quiet shame. A new congressional committee announced hearings. Karoline stood by the studio exit, watching the digital map of Nevada load onto Roth's screen. "How secure is the facility? Enough for a ghost," Roth muttered. "But we're not asking permission. We're going in." She nodded. "Then we finish this." As they prepared to leave, Karoline's phone buzzed. One message. Unknown number. "You're close. But he's not the only one who remembers." Her blood froze. "Menkon?" she whispered. "He's watching us." Roth read the message. "He wants to be found, but not yet." Karoline looked at the map again. "Then we'll find him on his terms." "But when we do, he's going to speak?" And when he did, the world would never see power, education, or truth the same way again. ChatGPT said the return to Washington wasn't quiet. Karoline, Roth, and Vega flew in aboard a low-profile government jet arranged through quiet back channels. No press, no motorcade. Just three figures moving through the Capitol like ghosts, carrying dynamite. The data drive sat in Karoline's hands like they were radioactive, 'cause, in a way, they were. Inside them were the blueprints of control proof that, for the last 2 decades, systems meant to observe had silently begun to manipulate. Governments had used them, foreign actors had refined them. But the real horror was how seamlessly. The media, academia, and public discourse had been turned into a machine, one that looked exactly like democracy. It was just after 6 a.m. when they reached the underground entrance to the network. Ruma Secure Media War Room designed for crisis. Response. Karoline knew it well. It had been built during the early days of Trump's first term, as a backup if the White House press briefing room was ever compromised. But today she wasn't facing reporters. She was facing the country. Kristen Welker was already waiting inside, headphones on, blinking at her notes in disbelief. NBC had agreed to a live simulcast on one condition. They didn't want Karoline to give a political speech, only the evidence. "I hope you know what you're doing," Kristen said, not unkindly. "This is fake." "It's not," Karoline said. Kristen studied her for a moment, then gave a tight nod. "All right, we're live in 60 seconds. Karoline walked to the center of the soundproof studio. Screens were behind her. Across the world, millions were tuning in. Harvard had already denied everything. Garber had called her a conspiracy opportunist, but he had no idea what was coming. The red light blinked on. Kristen's voice carried the calm tone of a news anchor trained to control chaos. "Good morning. We begin today with a special report. Our guest is Karoline Leavitt, former White House press secretary, who claims to possess classified material connecting key academic institutions and foreign defense contractors to what she calls a democratic distortion network." "Karoline, what are we about to see?" Karoline looked straight into the lens. "Not what I believe," she said. "What I can prove." The first slide appeared Harvard Financial Records time-stamped, showing a $24 million wire transfer from a Jinjo-Meest tech conglomerate to a U.S. research grant. Then came internal emails between Garber and Mencken, marked with federal oversight warnings. Academic journals that had been subtly edited to promote public sentiment influence modeling. A government memo calling the Chorus Project an ongoing simulation of democratic responses to artificial political stimuli. Kristen stared, visibly rattled. These are signed, sealed. These are not theoretical." Karoline pressed on. "Here's a 2019 field report showing the testing of targeted emotional suggestion through micro-content in social platforms. Entire protest movements sparked, redirected, or dissolved. Not by truth or lies, but by emotional ratio feedback. Loops. What does that mean?" "It means public opinion wasn't just measured, it was sculpted." Kristen's mouth opened, then closed. Karoline turned to the camera again. "You think you've been voting freely, choosing what to see, believe. In 2020, the biggest decision you made wasn't at the ballot box. It was in what headline you read. And they engineered that too." The final video played, Mencken, sitting alone in the Nevada bunker, saying clearly, democracy didn't die. It was programmed. The studio was silent. Then Kristen Welker leaned forward. Karoline, you just detonated the most dangerous bomb in political history. What happens now? Karoline's voice was quiet but steady. Now the world gets to decide if it wants the truth or the comfort of the illusion. The feed ended. Within minutes, chaos erupted. Universities called emergency meetings. Senators demanded closed-door briefings. Foreign embassies went dark. A major European news outlet suspended 3 editors pending investigation. Social media exploded, half the world in panic, the other half in denial. And Garber. He disappeared. Last seen boarding a private jet from Logan Airport with no public destination filed. Karoline walked out into the morning light, exhausted but calm. Roth stood beside her. Vega had already vanished, returning to wherever analysts go when their job is done. You know they'll come after you now, Roth said. I know. You could have walked away. You could have leaked it anonymously. Karoline shook her head. I was the press secretary. My job was to speak for the people, even when they don't want to hear it. He smiled faintly. So what now? She looked out toward the Capitol. Now, she said, we find out who actually wants to live in a democracy and who only wanted to win inside of one. The sun rose over Washington, D.C., but this time, its light wasn't just shining on marble buildings and old flags. It was shining on the code behind the curtain. And someone finally had torn it down.